Welcome to Cognitive Crusade. Let's explore the day that changed American history, 9/11. September 11, 2001. A date forever seared into history, altering the course of a nation. The United States, a symbol of freedom, found itself under attack. The world watched in horror as the Twin Towers crumbled. The attacks were a calculated assault on American values. A new era began, marked by heightened security and a global war on terror. The attacks of 9/11 had a profound impact on the United States. The nation launched into a war on terror, with far-reaching consequences. The Department of Homeland Security was created, consolidating 22 federal agencies. The TSA was established to enhance airport security. The Patriot Act expanded the government's surveillance powers. The war on terror extended to military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. To comprehend the magnitude of 9/11, we must examine the timeline. The day began like any other, with people going about their routines. At 5:45 a.m., two hijackers passed through security in Maine. At 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 took off from Boston, headed for Los Angeles, California. There are 76 passengers, 11 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. 8:15 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from Boston, also headed for Los Angeles. There are 51 passengers, 9 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. At 8:19 a.m., a flight attendant reported a hijacking in progress and that the cockpit is unreachable. 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 takes off from Dulles outside of Washington, D.C., headed for Los Angeles. There are 53 passengers, 6 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. 8:24 a.m., Mohammed Atta, a hijacker on Flight 11, unintentionally alerts air controllers in Boston to the attack. He meant to press the button that allowed him to talk to the passengers on his flight. 8:37 a.m., after hearing the broadcast from Atta on Flight 11, Boston Air Traffic Control alerts the U.S. Air Force's Northeast Defense Sector, who then mobilized the Air National Guard to follow the plane. 8:42 a.m., United Flight 93 takes off from Newark, New Jersey after a delay due to routine traffic. It was headed for San Francisco, California. There are 33 passengers, 7 crew members, and 4 hijackers are on board. 8:46 a.m. Flight 11 crashes into the World Trade Center's North Tower. All passengers aboard are instantly killed, and employees of the WTC are trapped above the 91st floor. While the broadcasts are still showing the horrific crash of the North Tower, on camera at 9:03 a.m., Flight 175 crashes into the WTC's South Tower. All passengers aboard are killed instantly, and so are an unknown number of people in the tower. 9:05 a.m., President George W. Bush, in an elementary school classroom in Florida, is informed about the hit on the second tower. His chief of staff, Andrew Card, whispers the chilling news into the president's ear. Bush later wrote about his response. "I made the decision not to jump up immediately and leave the classroom. I didn't want to rattle the kids. I wanted to project a sense of calm. I had been in enough crises to know that the first thing the leader has to do is to project calm." The impact of Flight 175 confirmed the horrific truth. The nation grappled with the realization of a coordinated attack. Amidst the chaos, acts of courage and compassion unfolded. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. All passengers aboard are instantly killed, and so are 125 civilian and military personnel in the building. The attack on the Pentagon underscored the terrorists' audacity. The nation united in determination to honor the victims and confront extremism. At 9:05 a.m., amidst the escalating chaos in New York City, President George W. Bush was informed, "A second plane has hit the second tower. America is under attack." The weight of the world settled upon President Bush's shoulders, the gravity of the situation etched on his face. The nation looked to him for leadership. Bush, his demeanor calm despite the turmoil, made a conscious decision to remain composed, projecting stability. For the next several minutes he continued reading with the children. Aides worked behind the scenes to gather information and establish communication. 9:45 a.m., U.S. airspace is shut down under Operation Yellow Ribbon. All civilian aircraft are ordered to land at the nearest airport. 9:55 a.m., Air Force One with President George W. Bush aboard takes off from Florida. 9:57 a.m., passengers aboard Flight 93 begin to run up toward the cockpit. Jara, the pilot, begins to roll the plane back and forth in an attempt to destabilize the revolt. 9:59 a.m., The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. 10:02 a.m. Flight 93 plows into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Although its ultimate target is unknown, it was likely heading for either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. 10:18 a.m. President Bush authorizes any non-grounded planes to be shot down. At that time, all 4 hijacked planes had already crashed, but the president's team was operating under the impression that Flight 93 was still in the air. 10:28 a.m. The North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. 10:53 a.m. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld orders the U.S. military to move to a higher state of alert, going to DEFCON 3. 11:45 a.m. Air Force One lands at Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport, Louisiana. 12:15 p.m. Airspace in the United States is completely free of all commercial and private flights. 1:30 p.m. Air Force One leaves Barksdale. 2:30 p.m. Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York City, visits the fallen twin towers of the World Trade Center at what becomes known as Ground Zero. 3 p.m. Air Force One lands at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, and President Bush is immediately taken to a secure bunker that is capable of withstanding a nuclear attack. 4:30 p.m. Air Force One leaves Offutt and heads back toward Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, D.C. 5:30 p.m. Building 7 of the World Trade Center collapses. 8:30 p.m. President Bush addresses the nation. Although to many Americans 9/11 seemed like a random act of terror, the roots of the event had been developing for years. A combination of factors that coalesced in the late 1990s led the catastrophic event. These factors included regional conditions in the Middle East that motivated the perpetrators, as well as intelligence lapses and failures that left the United States vulnerable. Osama bin Laden was relatively unknown in the United States before 9/11, even as he was amassing popularity, followers, and fame in the Middle East during the 1990s. In 1988, he was one of the founders of Al-Qaeda, a militant Islamic terrorist organization that organized and carried out the 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden called for indiscriminate killing of all Americans who, he claimed, were the worst thieves in the world today. It was the perfect historical moment for that rallying cry. Throughout the 20th century, a wave of secular nationalist revolutions swept through the Middle East, taking root in Egypt, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, and other countries. While these movements were awash in promising ideology, the new regimes quickly became autocratic and suppressed dissent. Their critics turned to violent revolution to express their dissatisfaction with the secular governments. At the same time, social malaise, especially among young men who were struggling to find decent jobs and start their own families in corrupt oil states, provided easy targets for radicalization. Bin Laden's message that America was the head of the snake and the root of all society's problems resonated well with the discontent. By the mid-1990s, bin Laden was the head of Al-Qaeda, a multifaceted and highly developed terrorist network carrying out attack after attack on Americans in the Middle East. It was a new type of terrorism to which the U.S. intelligence agencies struggled to adapt. Much of the intelligence community had not even imaged the specific type of hijacking and terrorism carried out on 9/11. They were preparing for threats such as the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center and bombing in 2000 of the USS Cole. Much of the intelligence community's focus was on reactive law enforcement activity rather than proactive countering of terrorism. A telling quote from the 9/11 Commission report focuses on the lack of a proactive response. The process was meant, by its nature, to mark for the public as the events finished, case solved, justice done. It was not designed to ask if the events might be harbingers of worse to come, nor did it allow for aggregating and analyzing facts to see if they could provide clues to terrorist tactics more generally, methods of entry and finance, and mode of operation inside the United States. Bin Laden had amassed substantial power due to conditions in the Middle East, as well as his charismatic leadership, and the U.S. intelligence community was underprepared for a 9/11-style attack. In the aftermath of 9/11, these two factors continued to affect U.S. policy in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq.